Alisha Vasquez is fifth generation Tucsonense whose roots run deep in Tucson. Alicia's political consciousness was nurtured by punk rock, which increased her larger sociopolitical issues. Alisha was the first person in her family to attend college. At the University of Arizona, her study of ideas of identity, Chicana feminism, and neoliberalism helped her digest growing up in the Sonoran borderlands. And here is Alisha.
Should I go?
You're up.
Yeah? Yes? Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Alisha. I'm going to be sharing some slides with you and kind of taking you through a journey based on these slides. And so I'll go ahead and just start the slideshow and talk over that for a little bit. Come in here and there. There we go. Alright, so I hope you can see, yeah, okay, it looks like you can see this. So the title of my presentation is called Disability, Capitalism, and Nation States. And this image here is something that I always draw for my students when I talk about intersectionality, because I think each line kind of represents our multiple identities, and we all come together in that middle point. And if any of you have read Breakfast with Champions by Kurt Vonnegut, that's where I got that image from. So I have 4 goals in my talk. My first is to tell you a little bit about my intersecting identities. To talk about being disabled will teach you for the Middle and College Border Studies program and how all of my identities intersect or come together as a teacher. I also want to talk about my American disability privilege. And lastly, I want to provide a globalized disability analysis and talk about how it relates to capitalism, looking at disability across nation-state borders. And I definitely am using some academic terms, but I hope to kind of break these down for you as we go on. So this is me as a piñata that my partner made of me, and I know the date because it was my birthday 4 years ago, so I turned 32 today, my birthday. But I think that this piñata talks a lot about who I am. So it was originally a Dora the Explorer piñata, and he bought it and added the glasses, added crutches, and cut the leg to make it shorter because I was born with a short leg and I had surgery to quote unquote fix it or make my leg like the other. But I also wanted to just kind of out myself or talk about the different identities that I consider holding. So first off, I consider myself Chicana, which is Mexican American with a political or radical focus. I'm disabled. I come from a low-income family. My mom is a house cleaner and has been since I was a child. She's also Mexican American. My biological father was white, but I didn't really know him or his family. So I've grown up with my Mexican American family. I was also a first-generation college student. I got a scholarship to go to the University of Arizona. This picture is 2 little girls. I'm the larger of the 2 dressed as a little tennis player with crutches. And I have the device that lengthens my leg called the Alisha, which is like a metal device. And standing next to me, dressed as a little bunny rabbit, is my little sister. And I include these images, or this image specifically, because over the 20 surgeries that I had to lengthen my leg, I've had a ton of family support. Again, only my mom's family, which is the Mexican American side of the family. But yeah, they've been very supportive, and I just wanted to give a shout out to them. So I went to the U of A, and I got my bachelor's in women's studies and history, and it was there that I discovered something called disability studies. and also Chicana feminism. And I wanted to continue studying disability history. So I went to San Francisco State with the founder of disability history. I wanted to study with him. His name was Paul Longmore. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of him. But unfortunately, 2 weeks after I moved to San Francisco, Paul died. And so I was left in a history department that nobody else knew about disability history. And on top of that, within the history department, there was only one faculty of color, and she was Pinay, which is Filipino American. And so I felt really out of place because when I realized I didn't have anybody to study disability with, I started studying Chicana and Chicano history a little bit more. And I felt really out of place, and a good example is the department head told me that if I wanted to study Hispanics, I had to go down to the ethnic studies department. And I was really confused because how I was at Oregon. So this is a picture of me with a microphone in front of my mouth, looking kind of out of it. But this was me presenting about Chicana or Chicanx, which is a gender-inclusive term, disability in 2012. And I have this quote, ni aquí ni allá, which means like neither here nor there. Because in the disability world, I always felt like the most Chicana person there, or like maybe the only person who identified as Chicana. But at the Chicano conferences, I always felt like the only disabled person there. And so when I would talk about my experiences, very few people, I think, I actually found very few people that had similar experiences with me. And it was really isolating, but I did graduate from San Francisco State with my master's in history, and I focused on essentially myself, Chicanx folks with disabilities. And this picture is me holding my mecha, or the Movimiento Estudiantil de Chicano de Plan, which is like the Mexican American or the Chicano student organization. And in front of me are my grandparents, right, my abuelos. They were very, very important to me, and they taught me a lot of what I knew. They helped raise me, and so I did that, you know, not just for myself. I didn't get my master's just for myself, but I did it for me and my family. And it's their stories, I think, and their resilience that helped me see that. In San Francisco, I have a picture of 3 lighter skin brown women at the San Francisco State graduation. Dr. Sandra Soto was my mentor as an undergrad, and Gloria Negrete Lopez was my comadre, or my friend. And this was a community that was very important to me, because in these spaces of higher education, when you already feel like an outcast, you need that community there. So I moved back to Tucson after graduating from San Francisco State. And I did a lot of things in the community. I really tried to put my master's degree to work, but it was really hard to find a job because the economy was really bad then. And so I included several pictures of some of the stuff that I did. This one is me giving a talk at International Women's Day, and I'm holding a picture of Alisha Vasquez, which is my great-great-grandfather who came to Tucson in 1880 from outside Sonoran, Mexico. And so that's just one example of something that I did in the community. I did a girls' camp with my comadre and my friend Sarah Au. This is a picture in the punk rock club that I kind of grew up in. It's me, Sarah, and it was our idea to do this camp, and then my tia, or my aunt, and my mom. And so I think my family has continued to support me through all of my little endeavors. And this is a picture of me talking to the campers, right? So this girls' radical arts camp was what we put on. And it was put together by women of color in Tucson who, you know, grew up poor. Like, not a lot of us didn't have that opportunity to go to summer camp or do all these things. So we created this place where we talked about things like racism, sexism, feminism, ageism, ableism, all of these things that impacted us as, you know, grown women in Tucson that we know are not talked about to our youth, our younger girls in our community. So we had about 30 girls between the ages of 5 and 17 participate. And I think, I've always talked about intersectionality, and I talked about also homophobia and transphobia is on here too. We talked about all of these identities intersecting. And lastly, I talked a little bit about juvenile justice reform, which I was involved in back in the screen, I think. No, maybe not. Okay, there I am. So I also did a lot of work with juvenile justice reform when I came back, and all of these things that I was doing was volunteer, and which was hard, right? Because I lived on disability and had student loans to pay back, but didn't have all that, didn't have much money. But I was doing a lot of things that I loved, so I feel very, very honored and grateful that I had the privilege and opportunity to do that. And so I started teaching at the community college also. I was teaching Chicana history, and going back to the desktop. And then I was approached by the Border Studies program, which is a study abroad program. And this is a picture of my three colleagues and myself. I'm holding the crutch up with like kind of the power fist right up to U.S.-Mexico border wall between Nogales, Arizona, and Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. And essentially, this is the next slide. This is a group of students and myself and my coworker talked at the border wall, which are 21-foot metal barriers between the U.S. and Mexico. And what the Border Studies program does is it talks about why people migrate to the U.S. and Mexico, and between to the U.S. from places like Mexico and Latin American nations. And yeah, so I taught here, and in addition to coming to Tucson for a semester to learn about immigration and migration issues, we travel a lot. And I think it was in this traveling that I learned a lot more about myself and intersectionality. And so I had an epiphany when I started working for the program. In 2014, my boss asked me to write about being a person of color on the Border Studies program, and I just couldn't. I was the first faculty, like full-time person that they hired, and it was, I just couldn't because he assumed that all people of color have the same or similar experiences without looking at the multiple differences that an individual holds. And so my epiphany that I had was that I realized that unless someone experiences an oppression firsthand, they don't think of it. And this includes even folks that are in oppressed communities themselves. And I think a good example is I went to Guatemala right before starting this job to meet some of our community partners down there and brush up on my Spanish. And my boss thought it would just be, great, and I'd get like this free trip down to Guatemala. But it was actually really hard for me. I was down there for 5 weeks, and I couldn't go outside of a 4-block radius because it was the cobblestone streets. I'm a crutch user. It rained a lot, so it made walking often hard. And yeah, so in this next slide, it's at the Occupy Oakland General Strike that happened on November 2nd, 2011. And it says, my queer and disabled welfare Chicana ass demand structural change. And so for me, I brought my analysis of not one single identity, but trying to get to the root causes of what makes oppression happen in our society. And so I brought all of this knowledge and all of my beliefs to teaching. And the sign that I just read off was taped to my crutch, and I walked around Oakland and was sick for 2 days after because I overdid it. Here's a picture of me and my colleagues in Nogales, Sonora. And this just kind of gets to the amount of traveling that we did. And I had never really traveled before this job. Like I had gone to the border city like Nogales, which is really close, it's about 60 miles from Tucson. My grandparents lived there. But I never until this job realized how important a U.S. passport is. And I think that a lot of people with disabilities, a lot of people from economically marginalized groups, including folks with disabilities and people of color, don't often have the opportunity to travel. So I have a picture of a passport up here, and even though another thing that I really learned is even when I experienced oppression in the U.S., this U.S. passport offers me a ton of privilege I didn't realize I had. So I'm gonna go through a couple places that I got to travel. So this is a picture of Santiago in Guatemala, which is a volcano and it's erupting, and there's lush greenery in the foreground. This picture is from Oaxaca in Mexico, Oaxaca City, and it's a picture of the city sprawling out with green hills in the background and some trees in the foreground. This next picture is on the beach, Boca del Cielo in Chiapas, Mexico. It's a picture of a cabana with a couple hammocks. And all of these places, this last one is Santa Anita in Guatemala, which is a coffee-producing community. This image is of a mural on one of their community's buildings with corn, coffee, and families depicted, as well as the armed struggle that they went through to kind of keep their traditional ways of life. And so all of these places I'm super lucky to get to go to, but I was being super. And so this is a picture of me in El Paso, Texas, on top of some rocks, holding my crutches up, straight up, and it's captioned of me being super. So I'm going to come back and talk to you all just a little bit. So what I mean when I say I'm being super is that I was hurting myself to fit into what modern society wanted me to be, or American society wanted me to be. And so this job broadened my life on what it means to be a person with a disability who travels. And I recognized after my first year of teaching that I couldn't continue at the level that I was going through. Going back to this desktop. Another realization that I had, is there? Okay, so another realization that I had is that American policy in fact also disables people. And so I have a picture here of La Bestia, which is the train. It's a train with a yellow face and kind of a red body that has historically carried people trying to get to the U.S.-Mexico border and to work from the southern part of Mexico. And because of American policy, this is tracks that the La Bestia goes on. American policy through something called Frontera Sur is a Mexican effort to control the flow of Central American migrants traveling through Mexico, mirroring the militarization of Mexico's border to the north. U.S. and Mexican migration officials deny that the U.S. has funded Frontera Sur itself, but it has become increasingly clear that the U.S. promoted the program through significant equipment donations and technical assistance. And this is to the tune of at least $79 million to militarize the borders between Chiapas and Oaxaca, which are Mexico's southern states, and Guatemala. And so this trained people, poor people who were migrating for their livelihood, were being disabled themselves on this experience. Some of them lose limbs, some of them become permanently injured, and other people actually die trying to make it up to the U.S. So that they can sustain their families. On top of that, we have border control checkpoints in Mexico's southern states that mirror checkpoints that exist in the U.S. And so this picture shows some of the new technology, some satellites, some new trucks, some lights, and barbed wire that you have to go through in order to get from Tapachula, which is like on the border of Guatemala and Mexico, up to Arriaga, which is where people will catch the train. And you also see in this next picture, you have to go through about 8 checkpoints in about a 30-mile distance. And again, you see this man who has opened up our van and is checking all of our U.S. passports. And it's easier for gringos or like white Americans or even people that are obviously from America to pass through these images. or through these places. And so I recognize I have like 2 minutes left, so capitalism and border militarization. So capitalism is the largely unquestioned economic system in the U.S. where a business's goal is to gain as much money as possible. All of us participate in a capitalist system. Border militarization, which is something that I've seen in my border as a person who lives on the U.S.-Mexico border, is a capitalist business. We're starting to see more weapons in detention centers. We're seeing jobs like Border Patrol, the Department of Homeland Security, ICE, which is Immigration, Customs Enforcement, and factories. And we're seeing technology like surveillance of tanks. And all of this is happening, and we're seeing brown or Latinx people and indigenous people being targeted at higher rates than they were in the past. And there is money to be made off of this. This picture is 3 brown men standing in green uniforms. They're Border Patrol in the Nogales sector. 2 of the men are holding assault rifles. And so it's our tax dollars as U.S. citizens that are paying for these racialized men, right, these outwardly brown men, to walk up and quote unquote secure the border from other men that look like them, other people that look like them. These people, these 3 men were lucky though because they were born on one side of the border as opposed to another. Another disgusting example of this enforcement is this is at the Federal ICE Detention Center. Again, our tax dollars are paid to lock up brown people who have been displaced from their country of origin due to American policies. His truck says, "I deport them" on the license plate, which I think to me talks about with the American flag in the background on the license plate. And for me, this talks about the business and kind of the xenophobia and the fear of foreigners and the hatred that goes into our U.S. immigration policy. And so I guess my final points are, what does the border have to do with disability? First, all U.S. citizens benefit from undocumented labor. The food we eat, the people who wash our dishes, some people that take care of us often are undocumented or come to this country in ways that the U.S. government, because of money, deems illegal. The U.S. government and corporations have created situations in foreign nations that displace people and cause them to have to migrate for survival, be it money, jobs, or escaping violence. If disability movements ignore undocumented labor, forced migration, and the criminalization of migrants, then we are perpetuating the violence that was inflicted on us as marginalized people. Disability communities cannot just fight for national inclusion into a capitalist system that marginalizes other people. And so those are just some of my thoughts. I've had a tremendous amount of ability privilege, of education privilege, of lots of privileges to be able to see the world in a little bit bigger analysis. And I just felt that it was my duty and something that I wanted to share with everybody. So I thank you all so much, and I thank the organizers. Yeah.
So unfortunately, once again, we don't have time for questions or comments. But I do have Alicia's email. So if any of you do have questions or comments for Alisha, please feel free to just reach out to me, and I will make sure that Alicia gets them.